A fobit is a soldier who spends most of his or her time back at the forward operating base, or FOB. And these are our installations over in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so a fobit the term is a mashup of fob and hobbit from J.R.R. Tolkien. And the hobbits didn't like to go outside of their shire. They were kind of cowardly and afraid of going out into the big world. Likewise, a soldier who is a fobit stays back at the fob and kind of busies themselves with paperwork to avoid the hazard of danger outside the wire. I think a lot of people, when they think of combat or when they think of war, they think of your average combat armed soldier who is out there, firing a weapon, a rifle or a mortar or whatever, or a basic field artillery piece. That is the stereotypical image that people bring to mind. They don't think of somebody, sitting at a desk, or somebody working in a dining facility, or somebody working in a motor pool, working on an engine. But all of those parts go into the whole. So that's one of the reasons I decided to write about Fobbits and about the Fobbit experience. It's sort of like if you were to take your average office cubicle if you were to take your average office cubicle out of any corporate America office and plunk it down into a war zone, that's kind of what I tried to recreate. My military background is I joined the Army active duty in 1988 as a journalist, and I spent my entire time in the Army working in public affairs. So I worked with the media and our various audiences, the internal audiences to the soldiers and the communities. I went to Baghdad in 2005 with the 3rd Infantry Division. They were out of Fort Stewart, Georgia. And I spent about a year there in country. When I first landed in Iraq, it was hot and kind of beige colored, like most soldiers would see. I think the most interesting thing I saw when I got to Baghdad, a soldier took me to the place where I'd be working, and I'd expected, not that I would be working under a hail of bullets or anything like that, but I expected more Spartan conditions. He took me into the office, and it turned out to be just a maze of cubicles, air conditioning, fluorescent lighting, somebody grinding espresso beans over to the side, people passing around computer jokes, people working on PowerPoint presentations. So that was kind of an eye-opener for me. That to me, when I got there, that was going to be my battlefield for the next year. In early 2005, the Iraqi people were holding their first elections not under the thumb of Saddam Hussein. We had removed him from power, and they were having their first elections to vote on their constitution. Later in the year, they actually elected their first leaders, their first president. So there's a lot of change, a lot of turmoil, a lot of unrest. People didn't know what to expect from the future, and we were right there in the middle of it. So my job with the 3rd Infantry Division, actually I was in Task Force Baghdad, was I was the Public Affairs NCO for the 3rd Infantry Division, which meant that I worked with the media. I sent out press releases. I spent most of my days typing press releases, answering calls from the media, from good folks like you and ABC News and New York Times. I was the typical Army spokesperson while I was there. So I was helping to tell the Army story to the folks back here. The kind of information that the media was looking for, of course, was to confirm any information about, our big incidents that went down. If there was an IED or a roadside bomb that went off and there were casualties, they wanted to know how many and the circumstances and who was killed, things like that. And also they just wanted to know the latest news on, some of our various projects that we were doing within the infrastructure. Like the sewer, the water, the electricity, all those projects that we were working on, the media was hungry to know those stories as well. I think there were a couple of situations where I couldn't give the full story to the media, and if so, that was strictly in the name of what we would call OPSEC, basically our operational security. For instance, one time we had a helicopter make a hard landing. Didn't crash, it didn't fall flaming from the sky, but it made a hard landing. And so we weren't able to tell the media much about that at the time, because obviously we didn't want the enemy to know, our weakness, I guess. And we didn't want them to know where it was. So we had to be kind of cagey about information like that at times. I was able to leave the base, but I really didn't leave the base. I only left camp, our Camp Liberty, once, and that was like a week after I arrived. We were doing what we would call a dog and pony show. So when I say a dog and pony show, that means a big, kind of like a big ceremony, a lot of pomp and circumstance. Okay, so we were doing one of those, big kind of media events down at Saddam Hussein's old parade grounds, military parade grounds. And I was sent out there to help set up kind of a cordon for the media, little media pool area. And I went there, arrived on a Black Hawk helicopter, landed, set up the chairs, the ropes. We had the ceremony. It took less than 15 minutes. There were no bombs or mortars that came in. And then we packed it up, folded up the chairs, and I left on the Black Hawk helicopter. It was all said and done in about 5 hours. And that's the last I saw of the real Baghdad. The rest of the time I spent at the FOB. I did live in a little bit of a cocoon there on the FOB, sort of an information cocoon, but I was also at the same time kind of at the heart of the information hub, because I worked in the task force headquarters, so we had a lot of information flowing in at various levels of classification. Some of it was classified, top secret, so on. So I was right there at the time. So I got a lot of information. I did know what was going on outside the wire, as we called it, but I never really experienced what it was like to be out there on the streets, patrolling day in and day out, like a lot of my colleagues did. Like I said, I was kind of sheltered within my little air-conditioned cubicle. As far as my relationship with other soldiers, I think it was good, but at the same time, I was a Fobbit. And I was living, the good, comfortable life. And when you see all of these combat arms soldiers come into the chow hall, and they've got dust and blood and sweat, and they've been through some really bad times out there in the last couple of hours, and you've been sitting in your air-conditioned cubicle eating a candy bar or whatever. There's obviously going to be a little bit of a disconnect between those two tribes, if you will. So yeah, but I think overall, we all did our jobs and we all got along. I left Baghdad in December of 2005. So when it came time for me to write the book, I had a choice. I could do a memoir, which a lot of people have done and done very well, or I could go with my gut instinct and kind of turn up the juice, kind of make it a little bit larger than life, make it a lot larger than life, and turn it into a novel. When I went over there, I knew I would probably be writing about the war, but I didn't know what would come of it. It could be a short story, it could be a play, it could be a poem, or it could be a novel. And certainly when I started writing Fobbit, I didn't know that it was going to be a comic novel. I was just kind of getting out some of the things that I'd experienced, and some of the, I think along the way, gradually the humor worked its way in. But like I said, I did have a choice. I could stick with the facts, and frankly, it would be kind of a boring book, because who wants to read about a guy sitting at his desk typing at a computer 14 hours a day and then not doing much else. Or I could make it a little bit more exciting and a little more comical and a little more tragic, because when I'm writing fiction, it allows me to really go outside myself, and allows allows me to have a lot more freedom to tell the story that I really wanted to tell.